Hey everybody, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're looking at the Bhagavad Gita,
Ooh.
specifically chapter 15.
Mm.
It's called the Book of Religion by Attaining the Supreme.
Okay.
But we're not going to get too caught up in, the specifically religious aspects of it. We're
Right.
going to look more at the universal ideas and imagery in this passage.
Right.
Stuff that kind of resonates no matter what your background is.
Yeah.
Really, it's a deep dive into the human experience. So are you ready to unpack this?
Absolutely. The thing that strikes me right away is that the chapter opens with this incredible image of a tree, the Aswatha tree.
Interesting.
It's a banyan tree, but it's described as like growing upside down,
Oh.
with its roots reaching upwards and branches spreading downwards.
So it's not your typical tree.
Not your typical tree, no.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Why all the upside down imagery?
Right, exactly. It's
Yeah.
not like your everyday oak tree you see out in the yard. It's a metaphor. Yeah.
And a really powerful one. In Hindu philosophy, this upside down Aswatha tree represents samsara,
Good.
which is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth.
Okay, so the roots reaching upwards are those like our desires,
Exactly.
like our aspirations pulling us towards something beyond this earthly realm.
Exactly. And then the branches growing downwards, those symbolize our
Yeah.
actions in the material world.
Gotcha.
The consequences of our desires,
Yeah.
how they tie us down here.
Yeah, that makes me think of the line in the poem, its branches shoot to heaven and sink to earth, even as the deeds of men.
Yes.
Exactly.
Our actions and our destinies are intertwined, just like the branches of this tree.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's this reminder that we're all connected to this larger cycle.
Right.
Our actions have consequences, and those consequences shape our journeys.
Okay, but then it gets even more interesting because the poem describes the leaves of this tree
Yeah.
as hymns which whisper truth.
Interesting.
Hymns whispering truth on an upside-down tree.
I know.
The tree.
Right. What does it all mean?
What's the significance of that?
Well, that's where the Vedas come in.
Okay.
The Vedas are these ancient Hindu scriptures.
Gotcha.
And they're considered like the source of true knowledge in this context.
Okay.
So those leaves represent that knowledge, the wisdom that can help us break free from this cycle of suffering that the tree symbolizes.
So are these leaves like little scrolls of wisdom
Kind of.
hanging from the tree, guiding us towards the truth?
Yeah, they represent the idea that like true knowledge and understanding can be a path to liberation from this cycle.
Okay, now I'm starting to see how this imagery all connects.
Right.
But the poem doesn't just describe the tree, right?
Oh.
It tells us how to escape from it.
It does.
It says, the axe of sharp detachment ye would whet and cleave the clinging snaky roots. Detachment, that sounds intense.
It does.
What does that even mean in a practical sense?
That's a great question. It's not about becoming like cold or indifferent. Detachment in this context is about freeing ourselves from the suffering that comes from clinging too tightly to our desires and outcomes.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that true happiness doesn't come from external things,
Right.
but from a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
So it's not about giving up on things altogether,
Right.
but it's more about shifting our perspective.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we can't control everything, but we can control how we respond to things.
Right.
And that shift in perspective can be incredibly liberating
Yeah.
because it frees us from the anxiety and frustration that comes from cleaning things we can't control.
I see. So, think about how much we all stress over things we can't control,
Yeah.
or how attached we get to possessions,
Absolutely.
or even relationships.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that kind of what the poem's getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. And it suggests that cleaving those attachments, using that axe of detachment can help us break free from that cycle of suffering represented by the tree,
Right.
cutting those snaky roots that are binding us to the material world.
That's a powerful image. But if we let go of all of that,
Yeah.
what's left?
Right, what's left?
What does the poem say about what lies beyond this cycle?
Well, that's where the poem shifts its focus to the undying spirit.
Okay.
It takes on form in the world. It's talking about the Atman, the soul.
Wait, so is there like a difference between the soul and the body?
Absolutely. The poem makes a really clear distinction.
Okay.
The body and the senses, those are temporary.
Yeah.
But the soul, the Atman, that's eternal and unchanging.
Oh,
He even describes the soul as like gathering senses, like the wind gathers scents.
that's a beautiful image.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very evocative.
So we're not just our senses.
No.
We're not just our thoughts. We're something more than that.
Exactly.
Something beyond.
Yeah, precisely. That's like a huge part of what the Bhagavad Gita is getting at, realizing our true nature, our essence, which is beyond just our physical form. It's this deeper awareness that connects us to something greater than ourselves.
Okay, that's starting to make more sense.
Good.
But then the poem goes on to talk about this twofold reality.
Yes.
The divided and the undivided.
The divided and the undivided.
What's that all about?
Well, this is where things get even deeper.
Okay.
The divided represents the world of form, individuality, separateness.
Yeah.
It's the world we experience with our senses,
Right.
The undivided, on the other hand,
Sorry.
represents unity, oneness, the ultimate reality beyond our limited perceptions.
So it's like two sides of the same coin, two ways of looking at reality.
Exactly. And, understanding this duality, this interplay between the divided and the undivided,
Yeah,
that's key to understanding the Bhagavad Gita's message of transcendence.
I see. And then just when you think you've wrapped your head around that, the poem introduces this whole other concept,
Oh, yeah.
Purushottama.
Purushottama. This is where we get to the heart of the chapter.
Ooh.
Purushottama is like the supreme self,
Okay.
the ultimate reality that transcends both the divided and the undivided.
So it's even beyond that duality we were just talking about?
Exactly. Think of it as like the source of all existence, the unifying force that sustains everything.
Okay.
It's a concept that points to something bigger than our usual understanding of reality.
And the poem suggests that, like, understanding Purushottama
Yeah.
is the key to true wisdom and liberation from this cycle of birth and death.
That's the ultimate goal, according to the Bhagavad Gita,
Wow.
to realize our connection to this supreme self
Yeah.
and break free from the limitations of, like, the material world.
It's a lot to take in, but it's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is. It
Yeah.
really challenges us to think differently about ourselves and our place in the world.
Yeah, and I'm definitely curious to explore these ideas further.
Me too.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think?
I agree. There's so much more to uncover in this chapter.
Right.
And I think it's worth taking a closer look at some of these concepts and how they might actually apply to our own lives.
Absolutely. I'm ready to keep digging.
Before we move on, I think it's worth pausing for a moment and like really appreciating the imagery that the poem uses
Yeah.
to like convey these like complex ideas, like this idea of Purushottama being higher still
Right.
than both the divided and the undivided.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful way to express something that's like beyond our typical understanding.
It really is. It's like trying to describe a color that doesn't exist.
Right.
Or a sound you've never heard.
Exactly. How do you put words to something
Yeah.
that transcends like our normal categories of thought?
Exactly.
But the poem somehow manages to give us like a glimpse
Yeah.
of this ultimate reality through metaphors and imagery that like evoke this sense of awe and wonder.
And it's not just about grasping the concept intellectually either, right? It's about experiencing it.
It is.
Like the poem suggests that understanding Purushottama
Yeah.
leads to like a kind of liberation.
Yeah.
A breaking free from the cycle of birth and death.
That's right. It's not just about knowing, it's about being.
right.
It's about realizing our connection to this supreme self
Yeah.
and how that realization changes everything.
How do we even begin to comprehend something so vast?
I know, right?
So beyond our usual ways of thinking?
Right.
It's like trying to fit the ocean into a teacup.
It's a good analogy.
Possible.
That's where the poem brings us back to this idea of knowledge,
Okay.
of seeking truth.
Right?
Remember those leaves we talked about?
Yeah.
The hymns which whisper truth?
Right. The leaves representing the Vedas.
Yeah.
Those ancient scriptures.
Exactly. The poem suggests that it starts with like immersing ourselves in those teachings,
Oh.
contemplating their meaning and allowing that wisdom to like seep into our being.
So it's not just reading about it.
No.
It's about actually living it.
Exactly.
Embodying that knowledge in our actions.
Absolutely.
And our way of being in the world.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about integrating those teachings into our lives.
Right.
Striving to align ourselves with this like higher understanding.
That makes sense, but it also sounds like a lifelong journey.
It is.
Yeah. A constant process of learning, growing, and refining our understanding.
It is, yeah. And the Bhagavad Gita acknowledges that it doesn't offer like a quick fix or a simple solution. It lays out this path of self-discovery and realization that unfolds over time.
But even if we never fully grasp this concept of Purushottama in this lifetime, the poem seems to suggest that just like striving toward that understanding, making that effort, can bring us closer to liberation. It's like we're always moving towards the light, even if we can't see it fully yet.
Precisely. It's the journey itself that's important. The process of seeking and growing.
Yeah.
And that journey, that seeking, is what ultimately brings us closer to the truth.
You know, one thing that really stands out to me in this chapter is the emphasis on the soul.
Yes.
The Atman. It's described as being like distinct from the body, the senses, even from the mind. It's like this independent spark of awareness within us.
That's like a fundamental concept in Hindu philosophy.
Okay.
The soul, the Atman, is considered like eternal, unchanging, pure consciousness.
Yeah.
It's the true self, the essence of who we are beyond our physical form.
And the poem uses this incredibly vivid image
to
describe how the soul interacts with the world.
Yeah.
It says the soul gathers senses like the wind gathers scents.
I love that image.
It's so evocative.
It is. It beautifully conveys the idea that like the soul isn't limited by the senses, but rather experiences the world through them. Like the wind carrying the fragrance of flowers without being bound to them.
So we're not our senses. We're not our thoughts.
No.
We're not even our experiences.
No, we're something deeper.
We're something deeper, something eternal.
Exactly. And that's the realization that the Bhagavad Gita is like pointing us towards.
Right.
It's a profound shift in perspective.
Yeah.
That can free us from the suffering caused by our attachment to the temporary and fleeting.
It's like seeing the world with new eyes.
Yes.
Recognizing that divine spark within ourselves and in everything around us.
And that recognition, that understanding, that's the key to living a life of like purpose and meaning.
This whole chapter is like a roadmap to a higher state of being, isn't it?
It is.
It lays out the path, the challenges,
the
ultimate reward.
It does. And it reminds us that like we all have the potential to reach that higher state. It's not something reserved for like a select few.
Yeah.
It's a possibility open to everyone.
But it's not an easy path, is it?
It's not, no.
It requires effort, discipline, a willingness to let go of our attachments.
Right.
That's where the axe of detachment comes in.
Exactly. That's the tool we need to like cut through the illusion of the material world.
Right.
And see reality for what it truly is.
What strikes me is how this ancient text speaks so directly to our modern lives.
I know.
You know?
I agree.
Even though it was written thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
The wisdom it contains feels incredibly relevant today.
Absolutely. The human condition hasn't really changed that much, you know?
No.
We still struggle with the same desires, fears, attachments. And the Bhagavad Gita offers this like timeless wisdom for navigating those challenges and finding like true fulfillment. It's like a guidebook for the soul's journey.
It is. It's a reminder that the path to liberation, to true happiness, is an inner journey.
Absolutely.
It's a journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening.
And that journey begins with a single step.
Yeah.
A step towards understanding, towards seeking truth, towards realizing our true nature.
It's almost like the poem is inviting us to take that step.
It is.
To embark on that journey of self-discovery. It's saying, here's the map, here's the path. Are you ready to explore?
And that exploration, that willingness to dive deeper into ourselves and the nature of reality. Yeah. That's where the real adventure begins.
We've been exploring some like pretty heady concepts.
Yeah.
But I think it's time to like bring it down to earth a bit, you know?
Right.
Like how can we actually apply these teachings to our everyday lives?
Yeah.
It's all well and good talk about like upside down trees and the supreme self and all that.
Yeah.
But how does this ancient wisdom translate into real world action?
That's a great question. You know, it's one thing to like grasp these concepts intellectually, but the real magic happens when we start to like embody them in our daily lives.
Right.
So let's start with this idea of detachment.
Good.
We talked about it earlier, but how can we actually cultivate detachment without becoming like emotionless robots?
Exactly.
It can't be about like suppressing all of our feelings, right?
Yeah, this doesn't sound very healthy.
No, not at all.
What does like a healthy approach to detachment look like?
I think it's about shifting our perspective.
Okay.
Instead of like clinging desperately to specific outcomes, we can focus on like doing our best in each moment, acting with integrity, and letting go of the need to control everything.
Right.
You know, it's about recognizing that we can't control external circumstances, but we can control our responses to them.
So it's less about like eliminating emotions?
Right.
And more about choosing how we respond to them.
Exactly.
Like instead of getting completely overwhelmed by anxiety when things don't go our way, we could acknowledge that feeling and choose to like focus on what we can control.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
You know, it frees us from so much of the suffering that we create for ourselves by clinging to things that we just can't control.
Right. Do you have any like examples of what that might look like in real life?
Sure. Imagine like you're working on a project that you're really passionate about.
Okay.
But the final decision, it's out of your hands.
Right.
A detached approach would be to like acknowledge that you've done everything you can and to accept the outcome, whatever it may be, without letting it define your self-worth.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about focusing on the process and the effort, not just the outcome.
Right.
So if things don't go as planned, we don't automatically see it as like a personal failure.
Right. And that shift in perspective can have like a ripple effect on how we experience everything.
Yeah.
It allows us to be more present, more engaged, and less fixated on a specific result.
Right.
We can find joy in the journey itself.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so detachment is one practical takeaway.
Yeah.
What about the concept of the soul?
Right.
Atman.
Yeah.
How does that apply to our daily lives?
Well, the Atman reminds us that we're not just our physical bodies, thoughts, emotions. There's a deeper, unchanging essence within us that connects us to something much greater than ourselves.
Yeah.
And that connection can be a source of like incredible strength and resilience.
So even when everything else feels like chaotic and uncertain, there's this unchanging part of us that remains grounded and connected to something bigger.
Exactly. It's like having an inner compass that guides us even when the world around us feels really turbulent.
I love that. It's a really comforting thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that even in the midst of challenges, even when we feel lost or alone, there's a part of us that remains untouched, unchanging, and connected to something divine.
You know, it's striking me as we're talking about this that these teachings aren't just about like personal growth and inner peace. You know, they also have implications for how we interact with the world around us.
Absolutely.
Like if we see this divine spark within ourselves, does it change how we see others?
Absolutely. The Bhagavad Gita like emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things, recognizing that we're all part of this larger web of life that can inspire us to act with more compassion, kindness, understanding.
Right.
It challenges us to see that divine spark in everyone we encounter.
So harming others is ultimately harming ourselves because we're all connected on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder to treat each other with respect and kindness.
It is. And it goes beyond just being nice.
Yeah, for sure.
It's about like recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being.
Absolutely.
Regardless of their actions or beliefs.
Exactly.
The Bhagavad Gita, it's not just a book of ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
It's like a guide to living a more meaningful and fulfilling life, both for ourselves and for the world around us.
It is. It reminds us that like true happiness doesn't come from like external things, you know?
Right.
But from inner peace, understanding, and a connection to something greater than ourselves.
Okay. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground. And explored some truly profound ideas.
We have.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, me too.
But it's definitely sparked like a desire in me to learn more.
Absolutely. It's a text that rewards repeated readings and deep contemplation.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is that even a short passage like the one we explored today can contain so much depth and wisdom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, we'll leave you with this.
Okay.
If the Aswatha tree represents the cycle of life,
Yeah.
what are the roots that, like, bind you? What are you clinging to that might be causing you suffering?
Right.
And what would it take to start cleaving those roots with that axe of detachment?
That's a good question for all of us.
It is.
To think about.
Remember, the path to liberation is an inner journey.
It is.
And it begins with a single step.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Bhagavad Gita.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an enriching journey.
It has.
And we hope it sparked your curiosity to explore these ideas further.